This is Heliox, where evidence meets empathy. Independent, moderated, timely, deep, gentle, clinical, global, and community conversations about things that matter. Breathe easy, we go deep and lightly surface the big ideas.
Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today we're jumping straight into something really interesting: high sensitivity. You might also hear researchers call it sensory processing sensitivity, or SPS.
Yeah, and it's quite common, actually. Estimates are around, 15 to 20% of the population?
Exactly, and right off the bat, it's important to say this isn't like a disorder or a problem needing fixing.
Absolutely not. Think of it more as a fundamental personality trait. Just how some people are wired to process things, sight, sounds, emotions, maybe more deeply, more intensely.
Right. So today, we've dug into a bunch of research papers, articles, and our mission is to really unpack this. We want to look at the signs, the potential upsides, and the science behind it.
And the goal is to give you a clear picture, understandable without getting bogged down in overly technical stuff.
Perfect. So let's dive in. When we say high sensitivity, what are we actually talking about?
Well, a key figure here is psychologist Elaine Aron. She really popularized the term highly sensitive person, or HSP.
Okay. HSP.
Yeah.
But in the research, it's more often SPS.
That's right, sensory processing sensitivity. And just to be clear, while some people with SPS might also have something called sensory processing disorder, SPS itself isn't a diagnosis you'd find in, say, the DSM-5.
Got it. So not a medical condition in that sense. Aaron and others see it more as, a natural variation.
Pretty much, yeah. A personality trait that might have even evolved because it offered certain advantages. Aaron's perspective is that it could be beneficial.
Advantages how? Like what kind of advantages?
Well, imagine being in a group ages ago, someone who's super aware of their surroundings. They might be the first to spot danger, right? Or pick up on really subtle social cues that help the group function better.
Okay, that makes sense. So at its heart, it's this heightened awareness of sensory stuff.
Exactly. Sights, sounds, smells, touch. But also those subtle social signals, people's moods, that kind of thing.
Can you give us a more everyday example? What might that feel like?
Sure. Think about a busy cafe. For many people, the noise chatter, machines, music, it sort of blends into the background.
Yeah, it's just background noise.
Right. But for someone with high SPS, each sound might stand out more. It could feel louder, more distinct. And after a while, it might become, genuinely overwhelming. Like the volume knob is turned way up.
Okay, that really paints a picture. So that intense sensory awareness is one piece.
Yeah.
What are some other common signs?
Well, related to that is having a low threshold for that awareness. Things just hit harder. Loud noises, bright flashing lights, really chaotic environments. They can be quite jarring.
Which leads to feeling overwhelmed easily.
Precisely. That's another key sign. Getting overstimulated. Because they're taking in so much information, processing it deeply, it's easier to feel swamped by it all.
And you often hear sensitivity linked with introversion or maybe being more emotional.
Yeah, that comes up a lot. And sometimes what looks like introversion might actually be a coping strategy, If busy places drain you, seeking quiet makes sense.
Right, to recharge.
Exactly. And the emotional sensitivity piece, it could be tied to that deeper processing. They feel their own emotions deeply, but they're often also very tuned into others' feelings. Empathy is a big one.
Oh, interesting. So they pick up on others' moods easily.
Very much so. They might notice subtle shifts in tone or body language that fly right past other people.
Okay. Any other signs that often come up?
Sometimes increased sensitivity to pain or even textures, and needing withdrawal time is common. After a lot of stimulation or just being in a less than ideal environment, they often need quiet, alone time to sort of reset.
Now, something we came across, this idea that maybe people are just more sensitive today than in the past. Is there anything to that?
That's a really common thought, isn't it? With screens, constant noise. But the sources suggest it's more about awareness. The concept of HSP, or SPS, is relatively new.
So we have a name for it now, a way to talk about it.
Exactly. Sensitive people have likely always been around, but now we have a framework to understand that sensitivity better. It's not that people have fundamentally changed, but our understanding has.
That's a crucial distinction. Okay, so we've talked about the challenges, overstimulation, needing downtime, but what about the flip side? Are there potential strengths or benefits here?
Oh, absolutely. It's definitely not all about the difficulties. That empathy we mentioned, that can be a huge strength.
How so?
While having that deep understanding of others can make people with high SPS really good at building strong connections, managing teams, even negotiating. They often have good insights into what makes people tick.
So that deep emotional processing translates into valuable interpersonal skills.
It can, yeah. And even the environmental sensitivity. While it can lead to overwhelm, it also means noticing things others miss.
Like spotting a potential problem early.
Exactly. A subtle change, a detail that's slightly off in the right situation, that awareness can be incredibly useful. And it bears repeating, this isn't something to be cured.
Right.
Understanding the trait is key. And support is available, like therapy or resources geared towards HSPs, to help navigate the challenges.
So it's about working with the trait, not against it. Could you recap those core elements driving this?
Sure. It really boils down to two main things: that tendency for deeper processing, especially of emotional information, and a lower tolerance, you could say, for high levels of sensory input before feeling overwhelmed.
And the environment matters a lot, doesn't it?
Hugely. Our sources really stress this. In a supportive, less chaotic setting, someone with high SPS might really thrive and bring their strength, like empathy, to the fore in relationships.
This is making a lot more sense.
Oh.
Okay, let's peek behind the curtain a bit. What does the science tell us? Is there a biological basis for SPS?
Yeah, this is where it gets fascinating. Research strongly suggests SPS is heritable. It runs in families, points to genetics.
So partly in our DNA.
Seems like it. And it's thought to be conserved through evolution, meaning it probably offered some kind of survival edge. The core idea is that the brains of highly sensitive individuals seem to process information more thoroughly.
More deep.
Right. And one source used a great phrase. It makes people sensitive to their environment for better and for worse.
Meaning?
Meaning, negative environments might hit them harder, potentially increasing risks for, say, anxiety or depression. But positive, nurturing environments, they might benefit more from those than less sensitive people. They really soak up the good stuff.
Wow, so it amplifies the effect of the environment, good or bad?
That's a good way to put it. And brain imaging studies like fMRI are starting to show this. They find links between SPS and how the brain handles information, cognitive, sensory, emotional. It points to a real biological underpinning.
So it's rooted in brain function.
It seems to be. It's generally viewed as a temperament trait, something you're sort of born with, not something developed later, though, of course, experiences shape how it plays out.
Especially childhood experiences.
Definitely. Difficult childhoods can have a particularly strong negative impact on high SPS individuals. But conversely, really positive, supportive upbringings can help them absolutely flourish.
You mentioned there are different ways researchers think about environmental sensitivity. How does SDS fit in?
Right, there are a few related ideas. One is differential susceptibility. It suggests some people are just generally more affected by both good and bad environments. Maybe an evolutionary bet hedging strategy.
Okay.
Then there's biological sensitivity to context, focusing more on physiological reactivity like stress hormones and how early life shapes that.
And Aaron's SPS model.
SPS, as Aaron defines it, is more of a behavioral trait, focusing on that depth of processing, awareness of subtleties, emotional reactivity, and getting easily overstimulated. And crucially, it gives us a way to measure it directly with questionnaire.
Questionnaires, right.
But interestingly, that core idea from differential susceptibility, being more sensitive to both positive and negative input, might actually be the underlying mechanism for all these related concepts.
So there are different lenses on a similar phenomenon. Wasn't there a metaphor about plants?
Ah, yeah, the orchid and dandelion. That's a popular one. Dandelions are robust, thrive almost anywhere. Orchids are more sensitive. They wilt in harsh conditions, but can be spectacular in the right nurturing environment.
That's helpful. And more recently?
More recently, some researchers proposed a middle group, the tulips, representing moderate sensitivity. It captures that idea of a spectrum.
Okay. Orchid, tulip, dandelion.
Yeah.
And research shows SPS interacting with those early experiences.
Absolutely. Studies link high SPS plus a positive childhood to really good outcomes. High SPS plus a difficult childhood, that predicts more struggles with negative emotions. Parental care matters hugely, too.
And it affects reactions in the moment as well.
Yes. Lab studies show high SPS folks react more strongly to negative things like disturbing news footage, but also more strongly to positive things, uplifting videos, positive parenting interactions. They just seem more responsive, period.
Even interventions, like therapy.
Yeah, there's evidence they might get more benefit from certain interventions, especially those focused on resilience or positive psychology.
It really drives home the importance of the right support and environment.
Yeah.
You mentioned questionnaires for measuring SPS.
Yep. The main one for adults is the Highly Sensitive Person Scale, the HSP scale. It's about 27 questions, self-report.
And for kids?
There's the Highly Sensitive Child Scale, the HSC scale, shorter, 12 items, can be filled out by the child or a parent. They ask about things like being bothered by loud noises, noticing subtle changes, feeling things deeply.
And these are used widely.
Oh yeah, translated into many languages. And get this, they've even developed a version for dogs, assessing sensitivity traits in canines.
No way. Sensitive dogs. Okay, so is SPS like an on-off switch? You either are or you aren't.
Good question. There's been some debate. Some early work hinted at categories, but newer analyses looking at large groups of people,
Yeah.
they suggest it's more likely a continuum, a
Yeah.
spectrum from low to medium to high sensitivity. Most people probably fall somewhere along that range.
Okay, so it's a spectrum. How does SPS relate to other personality traits we know about, like introversion, for instance?
That's a really important piece, figuring out where it fits. Researchers have compared it to existing models, like Eysenk's model looking at introversion, extroversion, and neuroticism, which is like proneness to negative emotions.
And where? What's the connection?
Generally, SPS tends to correlate with higher neuroticism and lower extroversion, which makes intuitive sense, right? Being easily overwhelmed might lead to more anxiety, and needing quiet time aligns with lower extroversion.
Okay. What about other personality theories?
They've looked at Gray's theory, too, about behavioral inhibition and activation systems. SPS seems linked to a stronger behavioral inhibition system, more sensitivity to potential punishment or threats.
And more detailed models.
Yeah, linking specific parts of SPS to temperament dimensions, like ease of excitation, getting overwhelmed, easily connects to negative affectivity and maybe lower enjoyment of high-intensity situations. But aesthetic sensitivity, appreciating art and beauty, links more to positive feelings and openness.
So it's nuanced. How about the big five traits most people hear about?
Right, the big five: neuroticism, extroversion, openness, agreeableness, conscientiousness. SPS usually shows positive links with neuroticism and openness to experience.
More anxious, but also more open.
Kind of, yeah. And usually a negative link with extroversion. But again, when you drill down into the specific facets within those broad traits, the picture gets more complex.
So the main takeaway is?
The main takeaway is that while SPS definitely overlaps with some existing traits like neuroticism and introversion, it's not identical to them. It seems to capture something distinct, a unique dimension of personality.
That's helpful. Okay, circle back to the biology again. You mentioned genetics, brain imaging. Can we get a bit more specific on the findings?
Sure. On the genetic side, twin studies suggest genes play a moderate role, maybe around 50% of the variation.
So nature and nurture both matter.
Definitely. They've looked at candidate genes, like ones involved in serotonin systems, which affects mood, and dopamine systems related to reward. Some intriguing links, but honestly, we need bigger studies, like genome-wide association studies, to get a clearer picture.
Okay, genetics is still unfolding. What about brain scans? fMRI.
The fMRI studies are really cool. Across different tasks, people higher in SPS often show more activation in brain areas involved in attention and planning actions, like the cingulate cortex and premotor areas.
So maybe deeper processing even at a basic level.
Perhaps. And when looking at emotional pictures, especially of partners or loved ones, they show heightened activity in areas linked to awareness, integrating sensory info, empathy. Think the insula, frontal regions.
More activity related to empathy and understanding others.
Seems like it. And interestingly, for positive images, they show a stronger response in the brain's reward pathways, especially if they had a positive childhood.
Wow, so positive experiences might literally feel more rewarding.
The brain activity suggests that, yeah. And for negative stuff, areas involved in emotion processing, like the amygdala, and self-control, like the prefrontal cortex, seem to respond differently depending on their childhood environment, too.
It keeps coming back to that interaction between the trait and life experiences.
It really does. There's even research linking specific dopamine-related genes, brain activity in an area called the precuneus, and SPS scores. It's complex, but the biological links are becoming clearer.
And cognitive processing. how they think.
Yeah, studies suggest differences in attention. Maybe they're better at picking up subtle things, which fits the deep processing idea, but maybe also more prone to getting distracted by irrelevant details sometimes. There's also evidence they might be better at picking up patterns unconsciously, like in implicit learning tasks.
And you mentioned animal studies earlier.
Right. Animal models, often involving serotonin systems, show traits resembling SPS. Things like processing sensory information faster, noticing small environmental changes more readily, adapting better to shifts in their surroundings.
Faster processing. Huh.
How? Well, in some models, it's linked to less filtering or inhibition in sensory parts of the brain, leading to sort of increased excitability. Differences in stress hormone systems, the HPA axis, are also seen. It all points towards a broad biological basis.
It's fascinating how it all connects. So let's talk outcomes. How does high sensitivity play out in life, the good and the challenging?
Well, as we said, it's not inherently negative. But combined with the negative environments or experiences, high SPS can increase the risk for internalizing problems like anxiety, depression.
That's the for worse part.
Exactly. But the for better is just as important. High SPS is linked to experiencing more positive emotions after good events, developing better social skills with supportive parenting, responding potentially better to positive interventions.
Another positive.
Higher creativity often comes up, and even a greater capacity for experiencing awe.
Ah, that's interesting. What about specific roles like parenting?
It's complex. Some studies suggest high SPS mothers might report more parenting stress, but also greater attunement to their child's needs. High SPS fathers seem to primarily report that greater attunement.
So potentially more intense, but also maybe more connected?
Could be. Managing their own emotions seems really key for sensitive parents. Difficulties with emotion regulation might be part of the pathway linking SPS to things like depression. And reacting more negatively to ambiguous social situations could be a risk factor, too.
And any links to other conditions?
There's some discussion about potential overlaps with sensory issues in conditions like autism spectrum disorder, particularly around sensory overload. But again, there might also be unique perceptual strengths linked to SPS.
So given all this, what kind of support or interventions seem most helpful for sensitive people who might be struggling?
Because they're so responsive, interventions focusing on building self-efficacy, confidence, and handling emotions and acceptance of difficult feelings might be particularly beneficial.
Learning to work with the intensity, maybe.
Exactly. And therapists really need to consider SPS. It could explain why some people respond differently to the same treatment. Tailoring approaches could be key.
And prevention.
Yes. There's a big push for prevention and psychoeducation, helping sensitive individuals themselves, plus parents and teachers, understand the trait. The hope is this leads to better self-care, strategies for managing overwhelm, and ultimately better well-being and adjustment.
This has been incredibly insightful. If we were to boil it down, what are the absolute key takeaways for our listeners?
I'd say, first, high sensitivity, or SPS, is real. It's a biologically influenced trait, not a flaw. It involves greater awareness and deeper processing of stimuli.
Okay, real biological deeper processing.
Second, this affects everything: emotions, social interactions, brain activity. It brings unique challenges, yes, but also significant strengths, like empathy and noticing details.
Right, it's a package deal, challenges and strengths.
And third, understanding this trait, whether in yourself or others, can be incredibly empowering. It gives you a framework for self-compassion, for making choices that support well-being, like finding the right environments or coping strategies.
That's really well put. It's about understanding, not judging.
Exactly. And, it makes you think, given this trait has likely been around forever, this capacity for deep processing, for noticing subtleties, what amazing contributions might highly sensitive people have made throughout history? And what unique perspectives do they offer now, especially in our super fast-paced, often overwhelming world?
That's a fantastic thought to leave people with. A lot to reflect on there about the value of different ways of experiencing the world. Thank you all for listening. We encourage you to explore further if this resonated with you. Thanks for listening today. 4 recurring narratives underlie every episode: boundary dissolution, adaptive complexity, embodied knowledge, and quantum-like uncertainty. These aren't just philosophical musings, but frameworks for understanding our modern world. We hope you continue exploring our other podcasts, responding to the content, and checking out our related articles at helioxpodcast.substack.com.